kind of ironic that my screen or my slide has a mask, since that's pretty much all we're going to be talking about today. So I'm sure not news to anybody. I was actually on I was a group member call on Thursday when this came out. So it was an immediate topic of conversation. New CDC guidance for fully vaccinated individuals. And this is what it says in part. Fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear a mask or physically distance in any setting except where required by federal, state, local, tribal, or territorial laws, rules, and regulations, including local businesses and workplace guidance. Keep in mind, this is non-healthcare settings, okay? First thing we need to remember is CDC does not have the rule of law behind it. Now, I've been telling you guys since March of 2020, you want to pay attention to the CDC, you want to follow their guidances as best you can. It's following the science. Right? And as an employer, from a safety point of view, CDC is the first place I'm going to tell you to go to check what you should or should not be doing. But again, it doesn't have the rule of law. It's a guidance. And I think one of the things we've all figured out in the last 5 days since the guidance came out is while the CDC, there's a lot of brilliant people there, you know, they're physicians and they're medical providers and they're public health officials and experts. They're not marketing artists, right? So they put this guidance out there, and I think a lot of people immediately thought, oh, we don't have to wear masks anymore. That was what most people jumped to, but we need to, it's more nuanced than that. I think what the CDC is saying is that for people who are vaccinated, for most people who are vaccinated, the vaccines are extremely effective. Right? And so it means if you've been fully vaccinated, and I'm going to talk in a second about what that means, you really should have, unless you have other health issues and talk to your doctor about that, you're pretty good now, right? You're in pretty good shape. So you are safe to go around without a mask. But still, we have plenty of unvaccinated people. We have kids who can't be vaccinated yet. We have people with underlying medical conditions who may never be able to get vaccinated. And then we have people who are going to choose never to get vaccinated. So it's all a little bit of nuance, right? So the first thing we need to do is to think about what does the actual law say? And I had somebody asked a question, somebody asked a question, about Philadelphia. So let me sort of go through what we know about the tri-state area. As of right now in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf has been kind of clear as mud, I think, on this. But basically what I'm coming up with is that we are going to expect most of the business restrictions to be lifted on May 31st. So stay tuned on that. Even though Pennsylvania has said we're following the CDC's guidance on the masking, those orders that came down late last year about what everything businesses should be doing, private businesses that aren't open to the public, if you follow the letter of those orders, we really still should be masking and social distancing and screening our employees. Those have not been officially revoked yet. I am thinking that's coming on May 31st. And then remember, the Philadelphia is its own entity, right? They have acted largely as their own jurisdiction throughout the pandemic. So nothing has been lifted in Philadelphia at this point. New Jersey has lifted the outdoor mask mandate, has not lifted an indoor mask mandate. We'll see what happens on that. Delaware, it looks like they're going to lift their mask mandate on the 21st of this month. So stay tuned on that as well. Also, OSHA has not said anything yet, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But also remember that you as an employer, you can do more than the law requires. Okay, you still have an obligation as an employer to provide a safe workplace. I know your employees are chomping at the bit, right? They're all saying, hey, CDC has said we don't have to wear masks anymore, so let's stop wearing masks. And you might even have people who are good with compliance before, who've started wearing the masks around their chins, have started wearing the mask under their nose, et cetera, et cetera. But your obligation to provide a safe workplace hasn't gone out the window. So you need to think about how to handle this. So if you haven't done it already, and you haven't made a final decision on what you're doing about masks, what I would probably do right now is put a communication out to your employees that says, hey, we know the CDC has relaxed their mask guidance. We're looking at it. We're trying to figure out what's best for our organization, and we're going to have an announcement for you on that soon. Okay. This is what the OSHA has said so far. Okay. This is a banner on their website, which basically says, we don't know what we're doing yet. We kind of defer to the CDC. Stay tuned. not extremely helpful, right? But stay tuned as far as what OSHA says. I think OSHA is going to largely fall in line with what CDC says, but we don't know for sure. And keep in mind, again, CDC does not have rule of law. OSHA does, in the sense that OSHA can come in to your workplace and investigate you and fine you and all that good stuff. So stay tuned a little bit on what OSHA may decide to do with this. All right, so another really important thing to remember is who counts as fully vaccinated. So I'm the pandemic safety officer at MEA. I've been collecting vaccination cards, copies of cards, and I'll talk about that again in a second. I recently had an employee send me a card and say, I'm fully vaccinated. And when I looked at that employee's card, the employee had their second shot just a few days prior. So no, that person was not fully vaccinated yet. Okay, fully vaccinated means 2 weeks post your last dose. So whether that's 1 dose of J&J or 2 doses of Moderna or Pfizer. So that's something to remember as well, what fully vaccinated really means. And I think that we've been talking about this, this issue of asking for proof of vaccination. I've been talking to you about this for months, and I think this is where it starts to become really important, right? CDC has now made a distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated. Are you as an employer comfortable with the honor code? Because I'm not. I think one of the things we know, as much as we love our employees, they're not always going to tell us 100% truth about everything. So if we tell our employees, it's the honor system, if you're vaccinated, stop wearing your mask. If you're unvaccinated, please keep wearing it. You know what's going to happen. Most of your employees are going to stop wearing masks. So I think it is, if you haven't done this already, I would seriously consider collecting copies of vaccination cards. In all of the states up here in the Northeast, you are allowed to do this. EEOC has said we are allowed to do this. I know there are some states, Texas and Florida come to mind, that have said we're not going to allow for vaccination passports. So if you have employees in some of those other states that have made a statement about vaccination passports, probably want to talk to an employment attorney in that state to make sure that you actually can collect the cards from your employees. But certainly from, like I said, states in the Northeast, you're fine. EEOC has said this is fine. The biggest issue here is you don't want to know anything more than tell me if you've been vaccinated, show me your card. That's all I want to know. So I actually sent, again, I'm PSO for MEA. I sent an email yesterday saying, hey, and I sent it to a group of blind copied people. If you're getting this email, it means I don't have a vaccination card from you. If you're not getting vaccinated, I don't need to know anything else. Don't even respond to this email. But if you have, if you have your final dose, I'd love to see your copy of your vaccination card, please. All right, so that's all we really want to know. You don't want to be garnering protected medical information from anybody. Just either show me your card or don't show me your card. Again, check your state law requirements, maintain those vaccination records as you would any other medical information. So a separate medical file, it doesn't go in the personnel file. Every employee in your organization should have a medical file. That's where your FMLA information goes. That's where your workers' compensation information goes. And that's where your COVID information goes. And keep in mind that this confidentiality obligation comes from the ADA. For the vast majority of employers, you are not covered by HIPAA. Okay, you are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, which has a confidentiality requirement within it. And if you don't have enough employees to be covered by ADA, which is 15, you are almost certainly covered by the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, Delaware's equivalent, which it applies to much smaller employers. All right, so what about your unvaccinated employees? Unless state or local regulations tell you otherwise, no matter what else you decide to do, your unvaccinated employees should still be following mitigation members, and that includes wearing masks. Okay. Keep in mind also that some of your vaccinated employees are going to want to keep wearing masks. So I know someone who has a spouse who will not be able to get the vaccine for medical reasons. That person may want to keep wearing a mask, at least until they know that their workplace is 70, 80, 90% vaccinated, right? So they know that they're not bringing home COVID. For those of us with kids, right? They just approved the Pfizer vaccine for 12 to 15, but no vaccine has been approved for 11 and under. So if you have kids, you may say, I want to keep wearing the masks until I know that my kids can get vaccinated, until they're fully vaccinated. So unless there is some conflict with your legitimate business needs that really says we don't want people wearing masks, this, for example, a safety issue, let people who want to wear masks wear masks. And this is the big one for me. this is the other considerations. And I've been having this conversation with members for months. I remember when the vaccines first came out, I had a member who called me up and said, we would love to reward and recognize our vaccinated employees with something. Give them a button that says I'm vaccinated, or give them a special bracelet that says I'm vaccinated. And while I kind of enjoy the spirit of that, it gave me initial concerns, which is now you're delineating between your vaccinated and your unvaccinated in the workplace. And what kind of problems is that going to cause? So you can all imagine, let's say you have a workplace where 60, 70% of your employees have been vaccinated. Maybe another 10 or 20% are interested in getting vaccinated. And then that last group, will never get vaccinated. Now you're creating, if you're going to say masks for the vaccinated, no masks for the unvaccinated, you are now sort of creating a two-tier system. And how's that going to play out? Your workforce. How is this going to play out in your workforce? Is this going to be easy peasy in your workforce? If so, fine. But is it going to cause harassment? Is it going to cause bullying? Is it going to cause other problems that just aren't worth it down the road? So really something for you to be thinking about. Again, if you're a member, you want to talk it through with me at Member Legal Services, happy to do that, sort of the pros and cons. Or if you're not a member, talk to your employment attorney if you really have concerns over this. All right, so that's my sort of down and dirty. We do have a piece out there about returning to the workplace. It may very well need to be updated, depends on what's happens with these mask mandates in the next couple of weeks, but it does give you sort of an overview of some of the issues that you need to be thinking about as we return to work. And certainly the return to work issue and what the latest and greatest on all the regulations is something we'll be following, and we're going to hope to cover more in depth, certainly at the law conference in June. So Kevin, how are we doing on questions?
Thank you, Amy. I'm just trying to read through these. So I think you've answered most of them. One question is, somebody comes back and doesn't give a vaccination card, should they get them to sign something about, alleviating the risk if they would get sick at work? The indemnification.
The waivers. The problem with the waivers is that you can't waive your rights under workers' compensation laws. So I think the waivers are probably of limited use. I get it why you might want to do that, but my guess is at the end of the day that the waivers aren't going to be worth very much to you.
Yeah, and unless there's some legal regulatory change, I agree.
Correct. Yep.
Someone said, how to respond if someone claims they've had COVID, so they have the natural immunity? Again, I don't think that's covered by the CDC at this point in time.
Yeah, it's very easy to say, well, that's great, but CDC hasn't said anything about that. We're following CDC guidance, just like we have for the last 16 months. So we're going to do what the CDC tells us.
Yeah, and someone said, it's an interesting question. Someone asked, what do you think will happen once you get to 70% of employees vaccinated? Can everyone remove it? And while the CDC hasn't said anything yet, I know the sports leagues have made 85% a standard and I believe some of them have started implementing that. So I don't know where that comes from at this point, but yeah. I think we'll see more and more guidance on that type of activity.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, like I said, what I really want to see as the employment attorney is I want to see the governors revoke their prior safety orders before I really do much. Because officially right now, like I said, in Pennsylvania, that safety order that was put in effect last fall is still there. So even though you see, so for example, and I haven't been in a store yet where a lot of people are walking around unmasked, but I've heard some of the bigger chains, CVS, Target, Walmart, are dropping the mask requirement. But in a lot of those places, you're still seeing employees wear masks. And that is probably either because the employees are choosing to, or because they're not vaccinated. So it might be we might be working in a two-tier system here for a little while of what applies to the public versus what applies to your workers. Your obligation as an employer to provide a safe workplace has not gone away.
Okay. Someone asked a question, which I don't. Just to clarify, employers cannot mandate non-vaccinated employees to wear masks. I don't know if you said that. If a non-vaccinated employees, you can still say you have to wear a mask.
Oh, yeah, the employer can make its own safety rules. Keep that, remember that. And especially if you're not prepared to make a definitive ruling, just say, everybody's wearing masks for now, and we're going to talk about it. Because part of it might be where you ultimately feel comfortable based on how vaccinated your employee population is. If you go to a point where 90+% of your employee population is vaccinated, you might feel differently about the masks than you do about if 35% of your employee workforce is vaccinated. So yeah, for now
but either way, the CDC has not said a non-vaccinated person can get rid of a mask. I think
no, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't. So I think all the questions in here that say, what if a non-vax person removes a mask? You can't do that right now. That's not under CDC or state guidance.
Absolutely correct.
I think there might be some confusion on that. And then let's see some of the chats.
And just to keep in mind, in some states, the governors have revoked their masks requirements. But not Pennsylvania, not New Jersey, and so far not Delaware.
And then someone said, wasn't the PA safety order meant to follow CDC guidance, which it was, but I think like you're saying, it's still a question of what happens in the place of employment where you have vaccinated and non-vaccinated together. That's still what we're all trying to figure out.
Yep.
Do those who have had COVID in the past 90 days need to still wear a mask? Yes, they do. So as Amy said, this is moving, happened just last week. I think you see some large retailers doing things. I think we still are going to see a lot of information coming out in the next week or two. And again, strongly encourage everyone to join us at the law conference, because I think we'll know a lot more at that point and be much more proactive and recommendation driven. At this point, we wanted to address kind of the questions we know everyone has, because we're all having the same conversations and we're seeing that, the Target and Starbucks announcements, but what someone does with their customers and what you do with the employees don't necessarily follow the same logic.
Yeah. And remember that I think part of our job here at MEA is to help you be compliant. So I'm going to give you I might lean slightly more conservative in my advice. And you might go out there in the world and say, well, people are not wearing masks around here. What is Amy talking about? I'm trying to keep you guys compliant and try to keep you out of trouble. So I'm going to err on the side of a little bit more conservative in my advice.
Someone asked a question, which I'm just going to, one last final question. In terms of we're collecting the vaccination cards. Is someone allowed to just have an employee tell them whether or not they're vaccinated without getting the vaccination? If that's a choice, is that a choice they have?
So, there's no real rule around this. Okay. I've seen three options. You collect vaccination cards. You have employees sign an affirmation that says they've been vaccinated, or you do the honor system. But from my point of view, I'm sorry, I don't trust people. I think that what we're going to find is that people are going to tell you they're vaccinated even though they're not, just so they can get out of the mask requirement. So again, you're the employer, you've got this obligation to provide a safe workplace, and you've got to provide the safe workplace for everybody, right? You've got to provide the safe workplace for your vaccinated employee who has an immunocompromised person at home who couldn't get a vaccine. And so if I'm just trusting people to tell me whether they've been vaccinated or not, I don't know that I'm meeting my obligation as an employer. So I would not go with that approach. I would collect vaccination cards.
And we are going to, someone made a good point. Next week, we'll have a lot more time for Q&A, so we'll, answer more questions as well. One question that we'll finish with, can anyone outside the PSO or HR access vaccination records?
Yeah, I would treat them as confidential medical information. So I know I had a question from a member earlier in the week. Could I just have, if I'm having a meeting, could I have the supervisor running the meeting collect vaccination status from everybody at the meeting to determine who can sit in the room, without social distancing, who can sit in the room without a mask? I would treat this like any other medical information. You wouldn't have your supervisors collecting FMLA records. Have HR, have your PSO collect it and treat it as confidential. Now, keep in mind that your employees are going to talk about this stuff. And if your workplace is like most workplaces, everybody knows who's vaccinated and who's not, but that's not your job as the employer to disseminate that information.
But they would be able to kind of tell a manager, Joe and Sally have to wear a mask, because you're going to have to report out.
And that's one of the challenges of all this. I'm talking about this as being confidential medical information, but as soon as you make the distinction between vaccinated and unvaccinated, everybody knows who everybody is anyway.
So a lot of fun stuff. So thank you, Amy, for whipping through a lot of that. And thanks again to the Able Pay folks. Really good session today. We know we had a lot of folks on, and hope we see you again next week.
All right, everybody have a great week.